right now with evangelistic festivals right now throughout the year?
We're pretty amazed, Charlie. We just finished our last evangelistic festival. Pastor Truman Herring and I have Truman Herring Ministries, who's a dear friend and a colleague in ministry. We partner a lot with work in the Middle East, and I just love Truman. We just finished our last evangelistic festival for this year. We know that we're well over 200,000 salvation decisions through the 10 festivals. We're waiting with the final numbers for our last festival that we just did a few days ago, and I'll be sure to give our viewers an update once we get those numbers in from the Middle East. Remember that during an evangelistic festival, after we preach and teach the gospel and talk about next steps, there's a follow-up team with King Television and Consuming Fires Ministries that literally takes 3, 4, 5, 6 days, sometimes up to a week, but certainly 3 to 5 days, just following up all the people who have come to Christ. They want to make sure people understood after we preach the gospel, they really have grasped it. Same issue we have anywhere around the world. And it just reminds me of the privilege of being part of Grace Global Network. And I want to thank each of you for praying for us and praying for myself and Truman and others for what Paul says about the gospel. I've had people come to me and say, man, you have a lot of cahoots to be able to preach in Pakistan or other parts of the world. Well, it's because, first off, I just believe God. I believe what the Word of God says. And it's not about me. It's about Jesus. And Truman feels the same way. Let me read you what Paul says in Romans 1:16 and 17. I want to thank you for your investments in GGN. You'll get an update at the end on where we're at and what we need to close up the year. But here's what Paul says. You're familiar with the first verse, but maybe you're not as familiar with the second verse. In Romans chapter 1, verse 16, he says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Paul wasn't ashamed, and I'm not ashamed, as Greg Kappas, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes. The gospel brings salvation to everyone who decides to believe. First to the Jew, then to the Gentiles. But verse 17, which we forget. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. A righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith.